With all of that being said, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ron Finklestein. Ron is an internationally published author and speaker who has written 4 business books. His books have been translated into 5 languages. They include 49 Marketing Secrets That Work to Grow Sales, 14 Business Mastery, Management and Leadership, and 9 Principles for Inspired Action, which is in personal development. His articles have appeared on entrepreneur.com, thestreet.com, and MSNBC.com. He has been quoted in newspapers all across the country. His contributions have been used in Chet Holmes' best-selling book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Please welcome Ron Finklestein as we discuss sales as a spiritual way of life.
Hi, this is Ron.
Hi, Ron. This is Bob.
If you have your cell phone and you forgot to turn it off, would you please put it on vibrate? I've been trying to do that like for the last 10 minutes and people keep calling me. Bob and I had that set up and I didn't want to turn it on vibrate because we couldn't do this. I want to share with you today a personal story as to why I think selling is a spiritual exercise, a spiritual experience, and a spiritual way of life. When we think of people who add value, who do we think about typically? We typically think primarily of religious people, ministers, priests, nuns. If we move through that process a little bit, we tend to think a little bit about potential social workers, nurses, teachers, people that make a difference, a true difference in the lives of people they work with every day. People who literally change and transform the life of the people that they touch. If you can imagine a teacher sitting down with a 6-year-old and teaching them how to read, can you imagine how that child's life will change as they grow into an adult and they read hundreds and potentially thousands of books? And they're introduced to concepts that they would never see before. And maybe even visit lands in their mind that they would never be exposed to. The Wizard of Oz, Moby Dick. Great stories, right? What about the nurse who's working with a woman who's going through chemotherapy and does nothing but simply hold her hand and comfort her during that trying time? Or the social worker who goes and delivers a basket of food to the family that has no money? Those are all simple, life-transforming, and powerfully affirmative actions. I think we would all agree with that. I'm at the age of my life now where legacy is very, very important to me. I just had my 60th birthday. And I really need to know that my life made a difference to somebody. I really need to know that that the work that I've spent my life doing has had a powerful impact, at least on a few people. So I asked myself, how can selling be a spiritual way of life? How can the profession of selling actually transform the lives of people that I touch every day? I want to share with you a story that I haven't shared with many people, but it's a very deeply personal story. I built a deck in my old house, and my wife affectionately refers to it as the aircraft carrier. And what it was is a very long deck, about 26 feet long, about 12 feet deep, and we used it as, quite frankly, a very large playpen for our children. One evening, I loved to watch the stars, and one evening I was sitting out on the porch, and I was just looking up, enjoying the stars, and I felt so really grateful because it's one of the few times that light pollution didn't destroy the look of the sky. And I had a powerful spiritual experience. I had the sensation of being transported to the end of the universe. I went past solar systems and planets and stars and little space dust and little pieces of space rock and even space junk. And there I am looking out at the far reaches of the universe and seeing everything in a way that I've never seen them before. For those of you who are familiar with Eastern philosophy, some people will call that the dance of Lila. It's the dance the universe performs every day. When I went through that experience, I felt total despair. I have never felt so bad. And the realization was, how can I make a difference when I'm such a small, small thing in this monstrous universe as I see solar systems and planets and stars doing the dance. And the dance was choreographed, and it was absolutely beautiful. And at that moment, one of the smallest pieces of space dust actually fell. And in my mind, the impression I got was that space dust died. An incredible thing happened. The whole universe, by its very nature, moved to fill that gap. I saw the whole dance change, as real to me as if you were sitting here. And that despair that I felt went from total despair to total elation and total joy. Because at that moment, I realized that my life does have meaning just by the fact that I am here. Just as your life has meaning by the fact that you are here. And if you doubt that, let me ask you a question. How many people here have children? Can I see a show of hands? Most of us, right? Who would be your children if you weren't here? Think about that for a moment. If you weren't here, who would be your children? There would be no one to take to school. There'd be no one to change the diapers. You wouldn't have somebody to feed, take to soccer. You wouldn't meet all the other parents. You wouldn't have an opportunity to see the children play and interact. Life would be very, very different if you weren't here. Likewise, if you don't have children, who would your parents be? Who would be your parents if your parents didn't have children? Now, those are a little bit strange questions, and I thank you for indulging me for a moment. But the bottom line, just the fact that you're here, changes the very fabric of space and time. You have changed the world simply by being here. When I realized that my life had meaning simply because I was born, I asked myself this question: how can I make my life meaningful in a very conscious way? As a decision that I want to make, as a decision to embrace life, to become something more than I am. This is where sales comes in for me. Sales plays a big role in my life because I never feel like I'm selling, even when I'm selling. And I'll show you why, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. As a sales trainer and a co-host on Small Business Talk Radio, I would invite you to tune into our program. We're on WELW.com on Monday from 5 to 5:30, or it's 13:30 in the AM dial. We had a gentleman from California come in. The gentleman is named by the name of Jim Cathcart, if anybody's familiar with him. I know Lisa is. I was first introduced to Jim many years ago. He wrote a book called The Acorn Principle. And it's just what the name implies. We all start out as a little acorn, and we grow and we prosper as we take roots. And Jim created the concept called relationship strategies in selling. And I only asked Jim 2 questions. I said, Jim, why do people dislike selling so much? And I said, Jim, what's your definition of selling? What's your definition of sales? I'd like to share with you a little bit. I'm not sure I totally agree with this, but he's right on target on some areas, why people dislike selling. They dislike selling because I don't want to be rejected, right? How many people are so afraid of being rejected? We personalize it. It's just feedback. We shouldn't personalize it. For others, it's lack of accountability. How many times has a sales rep told you something and didn't have any accountability in the process, and you didn't know whether you could believe them or not? There's just not a lot of integrity there, is there? And some people say it's just about the money. I'm just in it for the money. Would you buy from somebody who's just in it for the money? Nope. I wouldn't. I don't want to do that. None of those are very spiritual reasons to be in sales, are they? Now I ask myself, I've been doing this for 10 or 12 years, and I ask myself, what is the outcomes that people experience when I help a company grow by 50%? Or add a couple $100,000 to the bottom line in profit to a company? Because I was carrying around old beliefs about selling. Selling is getting people to do something that they don't want to do, getting them to buy something they don't want to buy. And I kind of wasn't feeling really good if those techniques were being used. So I had to come to grips with it. One of the things that I found is that every company, one of the reasons that we're so successful is that we find that one thing in every company that will change a life. I don't care what company it is, I don't care what business it is, I don't care what product you're selling. There's one thing when somebody buys that product or service, it will change a life in a very positive and a very profound way. Now, that leads me to the point where Jim was saying his definition of sales. Jim's definition of sales, which immediately resonated with me, and I actually started feeling it as I talk about it, is that selling is nothing more than changing somebody's life profitably. Think about that for a moment. You are providing so much value in what you're doing that they're willing to pay you for it. When they buy your product and service, you're able to communicate that transformation in a way that they understand, in a way they appreciate, in a way they accept, and in a way that says that I will pay for that.